Good morning.
Good morning.
I want to talk about God in the dark. Who hasn't felt the sting of depression and anxiety, or fear or sadness? Who doesn't have corners of their life that they should be dealing with, but they know they aren't? And as we stumble around in these places, we feel that God is far away in the light. But in the stories of our faith, it is in those very times when He feels the most distant, when it feels that we are lost in the darkness, that God is in fact most closely with us. Over the next few weeks, we'll take this encouragement from a fun part of the Old Testament called the book of Jonah, which begins with the phrase, "The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai." Now, the book of Jonah comes from a part of the Bible called the books of the prophets. And as far as those books go, this is a fairly typical introduction. The classic form of Hebrew prophecy goes something like this. The word of the Lord came to a certain prophet, and that word was God's view on the social and political and economic and religious goings-on. And so as we read through that prophecy, we get to know what God's view was on those issues. And then from that, we can then extrapolate some kind of workable Christianity or theology. For example, the reason that we, living in the 21st century, know what God's view is on issues like social justice and poverty is because of what the Hebrew prophets said about those issues in the 8th century BC. And so as readers of this strange story, we have an expectation straight away that what we're about to read is God's view on some aspect or other of Jonah's historical context. And from that, we then suppose that we can discern something valuable about our own context. And yet, as we read on from verse 1, our expectations are immediately crushed. The prophecy of Jonah has no prophecy in it. This sentence talks about the word of the Lord, but we never get to hear what the word of the Lord actually is. Furthermore, and unusually for Hebrew prophecy, there's no historical markers in the story. So we're not told that these events happened within the reign of a certain king or around about the time of certain events. This book is different. And I mention the difference because before we read the book of Jonah, we need to know how to read it. When you go to chapters, you intuitively understand that not all the books you see there are to be read and understood in the same way. You understand that you'll probably read a cookbook in a slightly different way from how you read a science fiction novel. And you'll read a science fiction novel in a slightly different way from how you read a historical biography. And you'll read that book slightly differently from how you'll read a weight loss manual. Well, just like chapters, the Bible is a collection of very different books. Some of them are historical biographies. Some of them are collections of poetry. Some of them are songs. Some of them are works of fantasy. Some of them are moralizing sermons. And we respond to these different types of literature in different ways. And I say that because the book of Jonah is an example of ancient satire. And when you read satire, the trick is not to get distracted by whether or not that satire is based upon actual events. The best example of this in the modern world is stand-up comedy. So my favourite stand-up comic at the moment is Bill Burr. And when I watch Bill Burr on television, I don't waste any time wondering about whether or not that story actually happened, or whether or not he actually did that with his girlfriend, or had that conversation with a hot dog seller that day. I don't bother even thinking about that. I just try and get the point he's making and appreciate it for what it is. So over the next 4 weeks, as we go through this ancient, essentially comedy routine, I'll point out the bits where the narrator is winking at you, and where he's saying, hey, this is funny. And in the dark humour, don't miss this. Because in the darkness you learn something. Okay, that aside. Verse 1. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. So at this point, the comic is saying this should be good. I've set the audience up to expect a certain kind of prophetic story. And the story's going to be salacious, and there's going to be interesting details, and the audience all think that's how this is going to go. Next sentence. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come before me. So in the ancient world, the phrase great city of Nineveh is a synonym for sin. The people to whom these words were originally written would have thought about Nineveh in the same way that we in North America might think about the red light district in Amsterdam or the streets of Patpong in Bangkok. To talk about Nineveh was to talk about a place of moral darkness, of human desperation. And Jonah is told that God wants him as a prophet to go and speak against these people. And Jonah as a prophet understands that inherent in the act of speaking against something includes the possibility of repentance and forgiveness and change. Right, ladies? When you talk to your boyfriend or your husband about an aspect of his behaviour that you'd like him to change, what are you telling him? That's not a sentence that has a full stop at the end, is it? That's a sentence that says, this needs to change, and I'm letting you know ahead of time that if it changes, I'm going to be very happy about that. And things are going to be awesome. So when we read that the word of the Lord came to Jonah and told him to go to Nineveh and speak against it, we would then expect to read that Jonah got up and went to Nineveh. But instead we read that Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for Tarshish. After paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. So, question for you. In that sentence, is there any word that's overused? I don't know what the right answer is, do I? Why don't you just tell us? Okay. Tarshish. Any high school student, not any church audience, but any high school student would tell you that the use of the word Tarshish here is too much. It doesn't need to appear 3 times in one sentence. And so the fact that it is used 3 times in one sentence is a clue that the comedian is trying to make a point, and the point has got something to do with Jonah's state of mind. Jonah is a prophet. In the opening line of the story, he was introduced to us as a man to whom the word of the Lord comes. And as soon as the word of the Lord comes, Jonah thinks of Tarshish, which for him, notice, is away from the Lord. That concept is also overused in this sentence. Twice it appears. Jonah goes away from the Lord, he flees from the Lord. Overkill. So what the narrator is doing in this sentence is linking Tarshish with the presence of God. And he's saying, in Jonah's worldview, there is a place you can go to get away from God. Now at this point he's winking. The city of Tarshish is just through the Straits of Gibraltar on the Atlantic shores of Spain. And in the ancient world, people spoke about Tarshish in the same way that we speak about Hawaii. Tarshish was beautiful. Tarshish was paradise. Beautiful beaches, beautiful women. It was one of those places where it was socially acceptable for a man to drink alcohol out of a hollowed out pineapple. Do you know what I mean? It was Spain, it was gorgeous, it was lovely. Now here's the comedy. If you were a betting man and you believed that there were places in this world where God was not, where would you put your money? The beautiful beach or the dirty brothel? God is either going to be on an Andalusian beach, or he's going to be in the red light district of Bangkok. Where is God and where is not? Is he going to be in the red light district of Bangkok, to be found in the pulsating techno music and the glaring neon and the naked women, or a relaxing beach with gentle waves, and palm trees and pineapples? Which one do you choose and not choose? Where do you find God and where do you not? Let me rephrase the question. We are going to go on a spiritual retreat as a church. We're going to go somewhere together where we can reconnect with our soul and get away from the hustle and the bustle and the material and the unimportant, and reconnect with what's inside and what really matters in life, and what's spiritual, and rediscover important things about our faith. Where should we have that retreat? A gentle beachside town or Sin City? Don't answer that. 9 out of 10 people are going to say the beach every time. And yet here the comedian turns the assumption on his head. In this piece of stand-up, God is to be found not in the nice places of this world, but in the darkness. God is not found where everything works, and where everything's relaxing and perfect and as it should be, where it's gentle and where it's ordered and where plan A never has to be deviated from. That's not where God is in this story. God is in the dark, where it's not working, where it's all going wrong. This is a bad joke, surely. And the religious point behind the bad joke is that if you want to find God and know His presence, quite often the place to look is in the dark. The point he's making is that when we're brave enough to look in the dark rooms of our lives, we often find God nestled somewhere in the shadows. Let's say that after church today, you're allowed to go to Bass Pro World, and you walk in the door and you immediately realize you need absolutely everything in the store, including a new torch. You always need a new torch, don't you? And you start off with the $9.99 cheapo ones, and you don't like those, and you go to the mag lights and they're a bit better, and then your eye catches the eponymously named torch. And you can hear angels singing the second you see it. You feel more manly just holding its lightsaber-like handle. Its 4,100 lumens of sheer masculine power just seem right to you. And so without thinking too much about it, you go to the checkout and you hand over your $179 and you go outside. It's worth it. It's not a toy, it's a tool. And you turn it on and it's daytime. Well, in that context, the 4,100 lumens of your military-grade aluminum casing, $179 manly torch are somewhat underwhelming. However, were you trapped underground in a disused coal mine surrounded by an inky blackness, that's another matter altogether, isn't it? In that dark and scary place, the 4,100 lumens of your torch are to you a lifeline. In the dark, whether your dark is actual or metaphorical, the light means everything. It is only in the dark that the light has any value. The comedy so far is saying, forget the beach, forget the place where it works, forget the place where it's nice and easy. Sure, the Spanish chicks are foxy and the tapas is to die for, but there's nothing for you there in the light. There's nothing for you in the place where everything works. That's gone, and it's not for you anyway. Journey instead towards the dark. That's where God is. That's where you find your way. And so at this point in the routine, we might pause and ask ourselves a couple of awkward questions. First of all, we could ask, what is Tarshish to us? In this story, it is a symbol of escape. It is an eject button on life. It is a place where we long for everything to be easy. What is your version of that? Where do you go to forget about who you are? A place perhaps, a substance, a fantasy? Where do you go in your head when you want to run away from the reality of your life and the duties to which you have been called? A second question we should ask is, do you know where your Nineveh is? In this story, it is a symbol of darkness. It is a place of shame and guilt and regret. Do you know where your darkness is? Do you know where the dark alleys are, the places you should visit, but you dare not because you know they're difficult? And do you notice, please, that the call upon Jonah was not to go to the darkness of this city and fix everything? It was simpler than that. His call was simply to go there and to name it. And I mention that because naming the darkness is often the beginning of healing. To say something as simple as, you know what, I'm depressed. You know what, this isn't working. You know what, I'm carrying way too much baggage from too long ago. I probably need to drink at night more often than I should. I've been a terrible father this past few years. I'm an awful mother. I'm caught in a toxic relationship that's going nowhere. To be brave enough to name darknesses like that in our lives is tantamount to shining a light upon them. And in the light, the darkness loses its terror and its power over us. The second we are brave enough to shine a light upon them, the power of the dark recedes and becomes that little bit more manageable and a little bit more fixable. Anyway, I digress. So here's the joke. Let me tell you the one about the prophet called Jonah who runs away from God to a place called Tarshish. And when God realized this, he said, oh no, where's Jonah? He's in Tarshish. That's outside my jurisdiction. Whatever will I do? So in response to this, the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid and cried out to his own God. So the point being made now is that the sailors on this boat are a religious bunch, but from a Jewish perspective, they're religious in a bad way. So here you have a cosmopolitan group of pagans who between them believe in dozens of gods and goddesses. And their fear, as they would have put it, is that one of these gods and goddesses is responsible for this storm that is about to kill us, which from a religious point of view is somewhat ironic. What you have among the crew of this pagan boat is a microcosm of the dark Nineveh to which Jonah doesn't want to go, but he ends up there anyway. And as the storm goes on, these religious sailors are working their way through their list of gods. You know, let's try Buddha. That didn't work. Let's try the next one, Zeus. That's not working. Let's try Aphrodite. That's not working. Try Oprah. Someone try Oprah. That might work. And none of it works. They haven't prayed to the right God yet. And so they, when prayer doesn't work, then you get practical, right? First I'll pray, then I'll deal with my actual problem. Don't take that the wrong way. So they go and they start to throw the cargo overboard. Desperate stuff. They're in the cargo business. Now they're throwing money overboard, 2,400 years before Lloyd's of London. This is the end of them. Desperate men doing desperate things in a desperate situation. But Jonah had gone down below deck, where he lay down and fell asleep. This is the third time in the story where we're told that Jonah's direction is down. We're only into verse, I don't have the numbers here, 5 or 6. For the third time we're told he's gone down. Do you notice this about life? You go down without realizing that you're going down. And if someone was doing a commentary on our life from 30,000 feet, they'd notice the down points. We don't notice them, we just go down. Anyway, Jonah's gone down and he's asleep. And in the course of their trips to the cargo hold to get the cargo to throw overboard, they find this this strange guy hidden away and sleeping, and they run to the captain and they say, dude, there's a passenger asleep in the hold, what gives? So the captain goes to him and says, how can you sleep? Get up and call. Stop there. This is an exact repeat of what God said to him in verse 2. In verse 2 in Hebrew, God said, Jonah, go and call to the city of Nineveh. And here in verse 6, these exact same words are repeated. Get up and call. Maybe he'll take notice of us. Maybe we won't die after all. So here's some more comedy. Now what do we have? Now we have the pagan captain of a pagan ship being a person who believes in prayer. He assumes, along with everyone else in the ancient world, that Jonah worships some kind of God. Now maybe it's time to pray. It's a thing that men do in dangerous situations. I've seen the movies. This is what you say. If you smoke them if you got them, pray if you can. So the pagan prays. The man of God, to whom the word of God comes, does not pray. Doesn't even try. At this point, the writer is inviting us to pick the hero of the story. Is it the pagan who believes the wrong things but is trying to fix it anyway? Or is it the good guy who's got all the right beliefs and has all the right knowledge, but he's checked out? Next sentence. Then the sailors said to each other, come, let us cast lots to find out who's responsible. Then they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. So here these pagan sailors make two correct assumptions. They assume that someone on board has done something to cause a storm which is now threatening their lives. And they further assume that by picking lots or rolling dice or whatever, they'll get to find out who the culprit was. So in the ancient world, including in the Bible, they believed that you got answers from God by rolling dice. So it was as simple as God, should I marry this one or that one? Roll a dice. Oh, thanks. Roll again. Thank you. That's better. That was how you made religious decisions in the ancient world. You rolled dice and you assumed that the answer you got was because God gave you the answer. So that's what's going on in this situation. They believe in this process. They roll dice, each of the sailors. Is it this guy? No. Is it this guy? No. Is it this guy? No. It comes to Jonah, and the dice rolls yes. So here you have a bunch of pagan sailors standing over the good guy Jonah on the deck of a boat, pitching heavily in a dangerous sea, and using the tools of their superstition to discern Jonah's guilt. They fire off a bunch of questions. Tell us, who is responsible for making all this trouble? What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What's your country? What people are you from? What I get from these questions is that these pagan sailors whose lives are in danger are fair men. Okay, so in their religious and superstitious world, the dice have pointed to Jonah's guilt. But they want to hear it from him. They want to give him a chance to say something in his defense. So he answered, I'm a Hebrew. I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. So from a Bible religious point of view, what Jonah says here is quite right. In the religions of the ancient world, there was a God for heaven, and there were lots of other gods for everything else. Gods for mountains, gods for rivers, gods for armpits, gods for football, gods for everything. Everything had a god. Well, my God, Jonah says, isn't like your silly gods. My God is the God of everything, including, crucial information, the sea that we're now dying on. This terrified them. And they asked, what did you do? And then we're told that they kind of knew he was running away from something, from someone, from some duty, from some responsibility. It wasn't working. Then we're told that the sea was getting rougher and rougher. And so they said to him, okay, so you're the theological expert, you're the guy to whom God speaks apparently. What should we do to make the sea calm down? You tell us how to make this situation better. Jonah's reply is blunt and shocking. Go away, I'm working. Pick me up, throw me into the sea, and it will become calm. Now, I don't think that would be my first option. If I believed all the things that Jonah believes, I think my first option would be to pray. And I'd pray quite sincerely. I'd say, God, I'm sorry for being an idiot. Please forgive me. Make the storm go away. Blah, blah, blah. That'd be my first option. I think my second option would be to do a deal with God. God, if you make this go away, I'll do whatever. I'll go back to Nineveh. I'll become a nun. I'll do some kind of. You ever done a deal with God? Of course you have. I'll do that. My third option, I don't know what my third option would be, but nowhere on my list of options would be throw me into the sea. Never would I say a thing like that. The only thing that we hear from this man's lips is that he wants to die. He seeks refuge in death. Now, when someone is going to take their own life, we have a word for that. But here's the dark humour. The pagans in the story, they're at least trying. They're trying to figure this out. They're trying to work things out. The prophet of God to whom God speaks isn't even interested. He doesn't want to know. He just wants to die. So the man of God says to the pagan sailors, throw me into the sea and everything will work out for you. Now, I'm not a nice person, so I'd be like, right, okay. You grab his legs, I'll grab his arms. Don't know the guy anyway. He's not family. Let's just get rid of him. But these pagans, the bad guys in the story, instead of doing that to save their own necks, they did their best to row back to land. But they could not, for the sea was wilder than before. So who are the good people in the story? The man of God who wants to die? Or the pagans who want to do everything they can to save his life? In this story, the good guys are the bad guys, and the bad guys are the good guys. Maybe one of the things the comedian is saying, that if we understand things too quickly, we may never understand them at all. Maybe to understand, we have to first of all understand that we don't understand as well as we think we do. Maybe, stepping out of our story and into the story of our lives, it's too early to judge. It's too early to say. It's too early to call an end on this. It's too early to say this has worked or this has not worked. It's too early to call this a good tale or a bad tale. Maybe we just don't know yet. Maybe life and faith aren't finished with us yet. Next sentence, then they cried out to the Lord, "Please, Lord, do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man. For you, Lord, have done as you pleased." So Jonah has been asked to cry out to God, but he has not. Now the pagan sailors are doing what he has not done. And notice that in doing this, they're at least trying to come to terms with God. They're at least trying to figure something out, find some way forward. Then they took Jonah at his insistence and they threw him overboard, and the sea grew calm. At this the men greatly feared God, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. That's a Bible way of saying that they have become converted to a God they had hitherto not known. So here's more dark humour. Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh because it was a dark place, full of dark people, who might get converted via his ministry. So instead he goes on a boat full of nasty pagans, who presumably from his point of view lived dark lives. And yet they end up getting converted because of his absence of ministry. The point behind the humour is too early to say. You have to come back next week. But in the meantime, we cannot despise the darkness. Yes, the dark is dark. Yes, it is a place of terror and fear. And yes, it is unwelcome. Absolutely. But that is not all that it is. It is also a place of learning. A place sometimes where we discover who we truly are and what truly matters in life. I, as you know, have been through my own share of darknesses in life. My feet know what rock bottom feels like. At least I think they do. Maybe they don't. Maybe that's yet to come. Who knows? But with hindsight, I have discovered, as have many of you, that the darkness looking back, whilst of course being unwelcome, was also a place of learning and discovery and faith. That wasn't all bad. Not always. More on that next week. Any questions on any of that?